How does one work on opening their heart, especially when overcoming past trauma? And how does one reconnect with and channel emotion?
You know, both parts of that question have really one answer, because opening our hearts, and I will assume that who's ever asking that question is asking it from a place of wanting to open our hearts, meaning in pure love, or to pure love. That opening our hearts means inviting divine love in, really wanting to raise whatever it is that we have called love until now, all of the human ways that we can love our partners, our parents, our children, our pets, nature, many of our behaviors, whatever it is that we've genuinely loved from a human perspective, that we are talking about how do we take that and move it through the heart chakra, always holding our awareness at the point between the eyebrows. Why do we do that? We do that because through meditation, through prayer, through staying conscious, through certainly the practice of Kriya Yoga, but even if we're not Kriyabans, all forms of meditation begin the process of drawing energy in and magnetizing it. And we want to be magnetizing it from the point between the eyebrow. We want that to be where the main magnet is. So whatever comes in any other way is drawn up to this center of Christ consciousness, to the center of God awareness in each of us. So we take all of that love that we felt, and in meditation, certainly, but there's other ways to do this, that we envision our heart center at the very core of our being. I've told many people recently, maybe get a beautiful artistic image of the chakras. They're available online, they're available in many places. Find one that you feel drawn to, that resonates with you energetically. Keep it in front of you while you're meditating. And when you get your energy, when you can feel it coming up to the center of the heart, even if you can't find it in that chakra with the sound or the color, you're not feeling it in that way yet. When you feel your heart, look at the heart chakra on however it's been depicted in that way, and just imagine energy flowing back and forth from your heart to that heart chakra, from your heart to that heart chakra. And at some point in that circular exchange of energy, that flow, grab it and bring all of your attention to the point between the eyebrows. That is one way of beginning to know how to transform emotion to devotion. All of the emotion that we feel needs to be transformed into devotion, certainly to really develop our relationship with the divine, but even to begin to know the truest love, which we could call emotional when it's sent out. Probably much of the love that many of us have known in the world is much more emotional than seated in the love of God. But when we begin to know that, we also know that the true purpose of relationships and of all of the love that we feel out in the world is a way to practice our love for God. And that every one of those relationships will benefit and grow in ways that really are beyond our ability to know now, when it becomes transformed into a divine love. And we begin to know that because of how much less personal it feels, how much less conditional it feels, how much without need, how much less reactive, that no matter what happens in those places where we've loved, nothing touches that love that we feel in our hearts. People can disappoint, do things that would have previously been disappointing to us. They can behave in bad ways. They can misbehave. They can get angry at us. They themselves can be very emotional. We are staying calm and uplifted and feel that joy of true divine love. We are not disappointed in them, ever. We don't get reactive and get angry. That's when we know that we have transformed emotion into devotion. And that is the whole point of the spiritual path. So I'm trying to remember the wording at the beginning of the question. Lakshmi, will you repeat it for me?
How does one work to open their heart, especially when overcoming past trauma? And how does one reconnect with and channel emotions?
And I will say, and I'm saying this with great awareness, and I hope who's ever asking this question can feel the compassion and the sensitivity. I've spent a lot of my life working with people who have gone through great, great trauma that I have chosen to never share when I'm sharing any stories, because there are some images we don't want to have implanted in our minds. And I'm saying this to say, I think that I really know the degree to which traumatic experiences can happen and affect us. But here is the truth. Whether we've lived in this life through trauma, great trauma, or not, number one, we've all lived through great trauma in some life. We've all lived through some of the experiences that I've heard about. And we are all on a spiritual path, and we are all headed to the exact same pinnacle. And nothing about what I just said changes, whether we've been through the trauma in this life or before. So if we have no memory of it, we're still using the same techniques. And one day we awaken to the realization that the love in our hearts has grown. The love from God and for God has grown so much within us. We feel its truth, we feel its presence, that we wake up and we realize that we have forgiven those people, those circumstances. No matter how hard we've tried before, by using every psychological tool that we can, and maybe we've made great strides with it, but nothing but the love of God can heal our hearts. So the goal remains the same, and we just keep practicing and practicing. Maybe we need a guide, a real in-life guide. We need to find help in the form of teachers and leaders. But the goal doesn't change. The goal is to fill our hearts with God's love. And when we do that, there is no room for fear or hate or anger. We're human beings, so we occasionally drift back. The cure, if you will, is always the same, and that is to just keep practicing love and kindness and compassion ourselves in whatever way we can, and to keep every antidote for fear its courage, for anger its peace, for hatred its love, to keep practicing every one of those till more and more and more we live there with an occasional foray into the other feelings, as opposed to living in those feelings, those emotions, with an occasional foray into the divine. And that's what happens with meditation, and that's what happens with satsang, with other spiritual seekers. That's why we do it. We'll never figure it out. We just keep practicing. And then one day, it's there. I'll share a personal story. My mother was a woman who knew she herself had been abused. She never spoke to me about it, but my sense as I got older was that it was a horrible abuse. I did know my grandmother, and she had a lot of meanness in her. But my mother lived with a lot of fear and a lot of a sense of herself that was so much less than who she is. Of course, I only came to see that later. She was a great lady, very bright, very creative, had an enormous ability to love, but she wasn't living that with us when we were children. And she was never physically abusive, but she was emotionally abusive, and she was demeaning. She was always pointing out what we weren't. She just didn't have it in her to help us see who we were. So I was raised with that. And 1 year of my life, I decided that I was going to do everything in my power to forgive her for the way she had treated me and us. And the whole world around me at the time, all of my friends, so many people were saying, why would you forgive her? You deserve to be angry. You should be angry. But by the grace of God, I was already feeling, I wasn't on this path yet, but something in me knew that my anger at her was killing my soul. That's what it felt like. It was hurting my soul, the deepest part of myself. So in spite of what everybody was saying to me, I said to my husband, this year is about forgiveness. I read about forgiveness. I went to workshops on forgiveness. I prayed about forgiveness. And one morning, and it's just like this, I woke up And I woke my husband up out of a sound sleep, and I said to him with great joy, "You won't believe what's happened." He's out of a sound sleep. He said to me, "What?" I said, "I have completely forgiven my mother." He looked at me. He said to me, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I am sure." And that was it. I had been through years of therapy, many things, and maybe it all had its role. But the prayer, the meditation, the absolute commitment, I wanted it unambivalently. And God gave it to me. I practiced loving her day in and day out, long before I actually felt that love. And it's not just that I forgave my mother, that experience of unconditional love, of acceptance of others, of myself, exactly as we are, of deep, deep, so beyond forgiveness, pure love. And she and I had the most beautiful, I call it perfect, and perfectly loving relationship for the last 10 years of her life. It was beautiful. It was God's grace. That's how this comes to us. That's what we need to see.